Hello again, and thanks for joining me. I am going to start photographing my character now. I know we've covered a lot so far. There's a couple of tools that we haven't covered, which are, well, I say a couple, there's quite a few, but we're going to cover a few as I'm getting ready to photograph this scene with my character. You will notice that I still have the poser window up. I still have the edit, lighting, atmosphere and clouds window up because I do tend to tweak a lot of things while I'm photographing. I might see things that I didn't like, that I didn't notice, and so I'll start making changes in editing as I start to shoot. Right now, you'll notice that it looks pretty normal. Basically, there are 3 number buttons on your keyboard that act as the lenses within the Black Dragon viewer. If you hit Control 9, that takes you to your 50 millimeter. What does that equate to? Well, a 50 millimeter in real life on a real camera is the baseline lens. That shows you what is a true image, basically, when you look through it, not using a digital camera unless it's what's called a full frame camera. But if you think back to the regular 35 millimeter, a 50 millimeter, and I say 35 millimeter camera, a 50 millimeter lens is as your eye would see it. So when you're looking through, you could, with one eye, you could basically open your other eye, and it's like you're seeing the same thing. There's no distortion. It doesn't look odd. It doesn't feel weird. So how does that translate to virtual? So 9, again, is your baseline. It's 50 millimeter. However, in this virtual world, when we're using the 50 millimeter, the baseline, which is number 9, as long as the focal point is center of where you're shooting, it's not distorted. The problem you're going to run into with distortion is if it's far left, it starts to distort the body, as you can see here, face, arms. And then if you go far right, you start to get distortion again. So there is distortion to left and right on the 9, the 50 millimeter. 8, so Control 8 on your keyboard, is going to act as a wide angle. That means you'll get more in the view. You can hit it a few times, not many. So let's count that again. I'm going to Control 9 it back to 50 millimeter. Control 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can only go back that much. So 4 clicks and you're done to the widest angle it will get. The problem with wide angles, it's very distorted. Even in center, the closer you get, the more distortion you get on the character. Some people like that distortion. It's not my thing, not for portraits. There are, again, it's like a spice rack. There's moments when it's good to use, and I am not going to use it, but if you're shooting landscape, things like that, it comes in handy. So back to Control 9. This is our baseline, the 50 millimeter. Now I'm going to show you the telephoto. So Control 0, hit the Control 0, you're going to get a telephoto lens. Now you can hit Control 0 quite a lot, actually. And in a virtual sense, what happens to your camera is it's actually compressing. It's pulling the camera back really far, but zooming in to the focus. What does that mean? That means that you need to have a very high draw distance activated and dial your LOD way up. It'll make a big difference because the further your camera goes back, the harder it is for the camera to see mesh. So you'll have a lot of problems if you use Control 0 a whole lot. Unless you have everything ultra, you're running a high LOD, you're running a very far distance as far as your draw distance goes. So Control 0, we're going to hit it quite a few times. So what happens in Control 0 in the telephoto sense, your character, you can go left, Ooh, no distortion or very little. Not really visible. You can go right, not a lot of distortion, very little. But you do start to lose background, so you don't have as much view of the above the character or below. That's okay. If you need more, just draw your camera back some, or if you want less, put your camera forward. But it is going to make your surroundings look bigger, I guess, in alignment with the focal point or the character in this sense, in this case. So it's going to affect how the surroundings look as well. You'll truly look like you're in a really big space. So it really just depends on what you're going for. You know, I might not want to shoot her at this angle. I might decide to go this angle. This looks kind of cool. I might go from this angle because I like that huge amount of light coming from behind. But I tend to play around with camera angle, with what's going on behind, and I will also change wind light settings depending. I might tweak a little bit on the posing and definitely switch up my camera. So my lens will change. Generally, I'm just going in between on the telephoto lens. So I'm going to kind of go silent for a bit, and I might speed this part up as well, and you'll get to see like all the different camera angles, wind light settings, and posing that might go on during a session. So just to slow it down a little bit so you guys can see what it is I'm doing, whenever I'm testing out a look, I see something that I like, I'm gonna do just a quick Control Shift S in order to get a snapshot. I do dial everything in based on custom levels, so I'm not sure what you're gonna see whenever you do this. It might just depend on your monitor, your GPU, but when I click save to disk, I get all of these options. I usually go with the 6K, which is 6016 times 3316. It does create quite a large file size. I do save everything as PNG because it is a lossless file. That way I am getting the full, the full image. It's not compressing it, etc. And then I will do a save as. So in my save as, again, just very organized, I'm going to save it out. I have an entire folder, of course, dedicated to this character, and it'll just save it in the next numerical order. So save. And I'll do that just to sort of like get this in the right start point whenever I start actually saving stuff that I know I'm going to want to tweak. But this also gives me a good, like, okay, let me pull myself back out of the scene. Let me get a broad perspective of what it is that I'm looking at and do I like it. To me, this shot of her, the pose, it looks a bit unnatural. It doesn't really look like if she's doing a touchdown in the air. It just sort of looks like she's running in the air. Not in love with this. I think I might just play around and change the posing up. So I'm probably going to do a really quick speed up of this part as well and do some changes to the posing. I kind of like this. I kind of like where I'm trying to take it. I like the pose a lot better. I do love the lighting. Totally in love with that. I maybe not so much appreciate the angle. Um, so I'm gonna try to work with that a little bit. And whenever you do posing based on an angle, it might look good in one angle and really awful in another angle. So as I start to move my camera around and take it out of this comfort zone, I might start to see things like already that right shoulder might be a problem, depending on what angle I'm looking at it. The neck might be a problem. Those are just some key things that I think off the bat. There's also possible that that right elbow might be an issue, depending on what angle I take. So I'm going to start to move angles around, and again, this might get sped up just depending on time. Just to give you a basic idea, I like where it's going. Not quite sure still what it is I'm looking for. Sometimes this process honestly could take me 3 hours just to figure out what it is that I want to do with it. So a couple of additional pieces that I want to bring up, as you might see when I'm going through this. Over here on the machinima sidebar, remember I said this was my second favorite set of tools. So right now it's just a matter of like getting to a point where I like the pose, I like the position, I like the scene. When lighting, I still haven't even really played around with. I dig this, but I might switch it up. I usually do. And then whenever I hit the machinima sidebar, the first thing that is going to be my go-to is my depth of field. So when I click that, you'll start to see, ooh, blurry, right? Oh, blurry. Oh, crap, what am I going to do? Like, my character's blurry. We can't have my character blurry. Never fear. Here's another great tool that Niran has put into Black Dragon that you will not find in Firestorm. And that is the amazing hover focal point. So with your mouse, you can hover over the area that you want to keep in focus, and it will come in focus, and then you can keyboard shortcut your snapshot. So the way that you set that is by clicking Control Shift X. And when you do that, everything that your cursor hovers over will become your focus point. Problems, remember when I said in the beginning that if there's an alpha in the way, so there's rain falling, which rain is on an alpha generally speaking, then your hover point is going to see that alpha. Even though you might not see it, it will. And then you won't be able to get a lock on the focus where you want it. So you do have to be aware of that situation. It does come up. It's had to make me readjust a scene based on just that. So keep it in mind. Hard to do whenever you're on the fly on other sims, but yeah, it is necessary evil. I don't move to do anything. I just do Control Shift S to get the shot. So you will find that in that smaller shot, it might not look as blurry as it does on the screen. You can edit the amount of blurriness as well by changing your f-stop and or changing the size of the lens. So we'll get to that in just a second. I'm going to show you where to find that. So I'm going to go away from here so it'll move the blur, as you can see. Boom, moves the blur. But if you come down here to your depth of field area in your machinima sidebar, field of view I pretty much leave where it's at. Don't really need to change that. F number though, that stands for your f-stop. So for all of you photographers or would-be photographers out there that are in the real world, that deal with real lenses on real cameras, that f-stop is basically your aperture. So if you want to change it to a 2.8, a 1.2, 1.0, you can do that. Fair warning, this does not operate exactly like a real lens does. It can be very overwhelming on those numbers, and you have to find that sweet spot. That 8.4, I would not call that a true 8.4 in the real world. In the real world, an 8.4 gets you pretty decent plane of focus. You might be able to shoot a small group on f8, but in this world, it almost acts like a 4, I would say. So if you were to dial it in to say, like, let's go where my sweet spot is in the real world is 2.8. So I'm going to actually dial in 2.8 so you can get a relative idea. And then if we, we're using a telephoto lens, mind you. So there is a very narrow, a very shallow depth of field with this, but you can kind of see it is going to also translate differently in the actual image. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot this. I've got the shot at 2.8. What I find usually works better, I'm going to put this back on an 8 right now. 8.4. Let me just dial it to a flat 8. Is the focal length actually makes a difference. Now, what I'm going to do is change focal length, and you can watch the blurriness of my character here real quick. So we're going to go to, let's just say 200. That's a good portrait lens. See, you can see how blurry this is. Pretty blurry, very shallow depth of field. You don't get any of this in focus. My hands are out of focus. Let's see how that translates in the snapped image. And I, for one, I was raised in my photographic world that for portrait work, eyes should almost always be tack sharp. So when I'm trying to make a decision on where I want to put focus, I'm throwing my focal lock over the eyes. So that's why you'll always see me point to the eyes. So grab a shot. You can see the blur going on in here, pretty significant. And it might not be worth it when I actually open it up. Since this is such a big scene, I would actually prefer that most of my doll is in focus. So I'm going to change that focal length back. I think, let's see what 75 looks like. 75 is pretty fair. My foot's out of focus at the front, some feathers in the back, but for the most part, it looks decent. So I'm gonna grab another shot. And bam. All right. So keep in mind, again, when you're shooting, you might want to give yourself some space, some frame space. I don't know if you like to crop, don't like to crop. I'm not big on cropping if I don't have to, but it's obviously necessary sometimes depending on what you're doing. And let me just turn that depth of field off because it does generate a lot of power. It does require a lot of power, I should say, in keeping up with that DOF. But, you know, it's really a matter of taste. I like to keep a bit of a cushion on my frame just so I can tweak it as I feel the need to. And I'm probably going to try to take a few more shots before I actually end this. Okay, so I'm actually probably going to run with this image. I feel like out of all the ones I shot, this might be my happy go-to. Who knows? I bring it up in Lightroom, I look at it, I debate. I don't like it. I shoot again. But this is just, again, basically the process that I wanted to take you through for what I do. The next few will be actually me showing you how I run through Lightroom. So I will be back.